Hello, everyone, and welcome to the XGMS webinar. Tonight, we have with us Earl Crockett, who is going to be speaking about money management. This is actually part 2 of our money management series, and the webinar for tonight is titled, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Earl is a financial advisor who specializes in holistic financial planning. He began his investment career at Delaware Investments in 2007, where he provided support in the operations department. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the XGMS webinar. Hold on, guys. Sorry, I am actually on the channel, and it just came across super loud. This is actually part 2 of our money management series, so let me delete that. Sorry about that. Back to Earl. He proceeded to work in wealth management with Merrill Lynch and banking services and at the UBS, in their separately managed accounts group. After graduating from Howard University in 2010, Earl joined Morgan Stanley, and his first 2 years worked in the retirement, private banking, and alternative investment areas. In preparation for his current role, Earl worked with a number of Morgan Stanley financial advisors across southern New Jersey to prepare financial plans for their clients. On a daily basis, he has worked closely with clients to assist them in planning to identify and meet their financial goals. Earl graduated magna cum laude from Howard University with a bachelor's degree in finance. Earl, I'm going to turn it over to you and welcome you to our webinar.
All right, thank you, Grace. It's good, nice to be here. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Grace, for that gracious introduction. It's always weird hearing your bio and hearing somebody talk about you when you're actually there. But so hopefully you guys get something from this. I'm going to kind of cover 3 topics that I thought would be relevant to you guys, which is budgeting, credit, and investing, right? So broad topics, but I'm going to try and go over them. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask at the end, write them down, jot them down. I plan not to talk too much, probably 25, 30 minutes, and I'll try to recap throughout so I don't lose you guys. I know, it's hard to remember a lot of things in a little bit of time, but from what Grace tells me, you guys are all pretty smart. So, so just to start off, like I said, I'm going to go over budgeting, credit, and investing. Starting with budgeting, I think there's 4 main things that go into a good budget, right? So you start with your income. So how much do you make? There's how much do you need to spend, right? So I always call those living expenses. Then there's how much do you actually spend? So your living expenses plus your discretionary income. So those are all those optional things. And then last but not least, savings. So to start, how much do you make, right? So income for the vast majority of you is probably going to come from some type of refund check, possibly a stipend or work study or other income that you're coming in, right? That's the top line item when you're looking at a budget. Next, you're going to go into how much do I spend? For most of you guys are going to have a lot of basic expenses covered, so room and board, things of that nature, but you still have necessities that you have to pay for. So those bills might not be the typical utilities. They may be the typical utilities, but most of those will be something like Hulu or Netflix or Spotify. These things are monthly bills that you have coming out. But there's also other living expenses that you need, such as toiletries, cleaning, bathing products, food. You may not be able to have everything covered from the university or your scholarship. There's probably other things like, you can, like water or, breakfast or who knows what it may be. But that's the second part, right? So income, living expenses, then you get to discretionary income. The discretionary income is pretty much, I typically say, the fun part of it, but that usually is entertainment, taxis, Uber rides nowadays, clothing, shoes. I know a lot of people buy shoes, clubs and bars, and travel, right? So your discretionary income could be more broad than that, but those are the things that kind of come to mind. I always tell people, don't recreate the wheel. When you're building a budget, this should be something very simple. The hard part about a budget is maintaining it. Building it should be very, very simple. This part is probably the hardest part, is finding out how much you spend. But for the majority of you, there's a place where you can find this, and it's already being recorded. and that's your bank statement. So you can go on to either the website of the bank you bank with or the banks you bank with, um, or you could go to your mobile app and you can get statements. A lot of these can be exported to Excel, so you can actually have the running totals. Look at last month's statement, look at the month before, and you should start to get a gist of how much you spend. To segment them into the different categories, whether it's living expenses or discretionary expenses, just go through and highlight. You'll see it and what you're spending the money on and where it's going. So, if it's the nightclub or it's an Uber ride, that's discretionary. These are not things that you need often to survive. Now, if it's a car note, if it's paying a utility bill back home, your cell phone bill, these are some of the needs. So, eliminate what's living expenses and discretionary. And I think that's a good place to move on to the last but not least when it comes to budgeting, savings. So a lot of people say, hey, I save a lot. You really don't know how much you save until you actually get it down and look where it's going, how it's adding up, right? So when I build a budget, first thing I do is income. Then I get out the living expenses. From there, then I start talking about what do I want to put in the two other boxes. I think savings is important, and I think you should budget that first before you do discretionary income, and you can back into it. And the way I say that, the reason why I say that is, say if you, once you get past living expenses, you've got $2,000 left. You can, based off how much you want to save, figure out how much you can spend on discretionary income. So definitely look at savings because that's going to be something that it's more of a goal versus just kind of looking at a statement. So if I was going to do I'm going to give you an example, break down some numbers of a typical budget, right? So say you're a student, I'm going to work off a 4-month budget, try to base it closely to a semester. So say you get $5,000 back in a refund check, you don't have any other income. You spend $1,000 on those living expenses during that time frame. So, like I said, this will be any bills you have, toiletries, cleaning products, bathing products, so on and so forth. You have $4,000 left, right? You can do one of two things. You can immediately say, you know what, I don't really need to save, so that means I got $1,000 a month. Or you can segment out savings. I often say this is where you want to segment out savings and back into the rest. So started with $5,000, $1,000 to your living expenses, you're left with $4,000 for 4 months. This is where you can say, I want to save $2,000. That would leave you with $2,000 left for discretionary income. That's $500 a month. It breaks down to about $125 a week. It's a simple math, right? So that's how you want to build a budget. That's how you want to break it down. And like I said, the hard part about a budget is maintaining it. I literally just built one out loud. It was as simple as that, but maintaining it, and maintaining it. The other part of it is tweaking it, right? So I don't want to, maintaining it is important. And part of that is, you go through the budget and you find out that $125 is not enough. Maybe you need $250. All of a sudden that changes things. Maybe you can't save as much. So then you can tweak your budget after, a month or 2 months to make sure that it's a useful budget for you and you're using it and it's viable and it's comfortable. You don't want to be killing yourself to stick to a budget. You want to be happy, but you don't want to be wasteful. So next, right? So budgeting, again, it's income, first line item, living expenses, discretionary income expenses, then saving. So when I say line item, just I'm making the budget in my mind. 4 things. All right, so moving on to credit. Credit. To you guys right now, for most of you, credit's not that important, but I think as you get older, it's going to be incredibly important. The first signs of use of credit for most people, they think just credit cards. But there's so much more than that. There's, when you get your mortgage, financing cars, starting a business, there's a lot of things that's credit's useful. So to start, I'm going to go with the basics, right? So I have credit broken down into 4 different categories. The basics, where to start, maintaining, and improving. So the basics, what are the types of credit? There are 3 types of credit. There's revolving, which is pretty much a typical credit card. Most people know that. They get it. It's easy enough. The second type of credit is installments. This is when you're financing a car, you're financing some type of maybe your mortgage, things like that, where you're given a lump sum of money you got an interest rate, and they say these are your monthly payments or these are your semi-annual payments that you have to pay, and at this point in time you'll be paid off. So there's installments, and then there's open. I think this is one of the most unknown pieces of credit, and people don't really pay attention to this, but it can really hurt you if you mess this part up. And the open types of credit are often cell phone accounts, or cell phone bills, or utility bills. A simple version of open credit is a charge card. The reason why these are open is because it's a set amount, but there's no revolving, right? So it'll be a set amount, you get it each month, and you pay it off at the end of that month. The reason why your cell phone bills and utility bills fall into this category is because what you're doing is they're opening up a line of credit, providing you a service that you're paying for afterwards. They have to front you that service or front the money to provide that service. So that's where you're using a line of credit pretty much to get that service. So 3 types of credit again: revolving, installment, open. All right, so to get started, where do you start? Where do you start? I always tell people it's as simple as getting a credit card from your bank. And because the vast majority of you, if not all of you, are students, you can always get a free student credit card from your bank. If your bank doesn't offer a free student credit card, then you might want to look somewhere else and get a credit card somewhere else, right? When I mean free, that means no fees, not no interest, right? And very rarely you're going to get a credit card, if ever, with no interest, but no fees, no annual fee, because you don't want to have that large fee hanging over you when you're not really using it that much. And you don't want to use it too much. You want something that's manageable, you want something that's easy to use, and you want to have that security by having a reputable bank behind it. So simple enough, go to your bank. I got my first credit card. It came with a slice of pizza. I banked with Bank of America. They were on campus. It worked out great. Next step, now that you got your credit card, maintaining, right? So there's maintaining and improving. Maintaining is probably the most important, because if you maintain your credit, you don't have to focus as much on improving it. To maintain your credit, you have to pay your monthly payments. It's as simple as that. There's going to be a minimum monthly payment. Make sure you pay at least that amount. Also pay your other bills, right? So like I said, those open lines of credit, make sure you're addressing those. If you're not addressing those, that's going to come up and bite you in the end. So make sure you're paying your other bills as well. And another piece of maintaining your credit is your utilization. So utilization is how much of your available credit are you using. So if you've gotten $1,000 line of credit and you use $400, that in essence would be your utilization would be 40%. I always tell people try to keep under 40%, because once you get over that point, there's break points where it starts to work against you. Because then if you're using all your available credit, that means, and you're not paying it off, that means you need money, right? Banks don't like to lend money to people who need money. They like lending money to people who want money. It's a big difference. So low utilization is key. And when I say low utilization, what they're focused on is revolving credit, not that open line of credit, right? So if you've got like a charge card, for example, and you're spending $200 even on a credit card, and you're paying it off before the end of the month, that's not really utilization, because they're going to check at the end of each month, and that's when they're going to report to the credit agencies, and they're going to see a zero balance. But when you have those credit cards and you've got that, say, $1,000 line of credit, you want to make sure that balance that's moving from month to month is low, and that's what low utilization is. And last but not least, when it comes to maintaining your credit, you got to check it, because there's going to be things that fall through the cracks. There's also going to be things that you may not even know, and it may not even be your fault or should even be on there, right? Somebody has your same name, and all of a sudden it gets put on your credit, it takes out the line of credit. The credit identity theft, that is real, and that is here to stay, people. So be prepared, check your credit. An easy place to check your credit, I know it sounds catchy, and I know a lot of people think it's crazy, freecreditreport.com. I mean, that's where I initially went and started getting credit reports, and that was very helpful. Another place you could go to, not only for credit report, but also might help with budgeting. Remember, I was saying you can get your statements there. Mint.com. So there's a lot of places that have apps. So like Mint.com has an app. They also help you with the website, and Mint.com, just to take a step back, is a website that you can put all your account information, and it'll pull it all together in one place. And you can use that to budget, you can use that to set goals, and they'll do all the tracking for you. There's a lot of apps and a lot of websites that'll help you do these things. The number one thing I say if you're going to use these applications and use these websites is do a little research, right? Check into them, see which ones are reputable. It's not that hard. Just Google, say, mint.com complaints or freecreditreport.com complaints or scams, and you'll get the information you need to make a smart decision. So bringing it full circle, bringing it back to credit, went over basics, where talked about where to start, and talked about maintaining. Last but not least, improving. One of the biggest things, and the reason why I talk about starting your credit now, there's no better time now if you don't have a credit card, even if you just turned 18, is time. Time really helps because if I've got a spotless credit report or a fantastic credit history and I've had it for 3 years, I may not actually have good credit because they just said, hey, look, you've only had it for 3 years. You could just be getting lucky. If I've had it for 30 years, now that person has good credit. That could be the difference between somebody having an 850 credit score or having a 650 credit score. So time matters. That's why I say get started now. Doesn't matter how much you start with, but by starting your credit history sooner rather than later, you're building that history, you're building that credibility. Another thing is consistency. They want to see you being consistent, right? I want to lend to somebody who's trustworthy, somebody who's got, time in, somebody who's consistently paying off their bills, maintaining their utilization low. Those are the people that you're going to feel comfortable, letting borrow your money because you're in essence, you want to make sure you get your money back. So consistency is really key. And as you go on, and like I said, when this is coming more towards the improving, diversification, right? So a lot of people, when I think that they're like, oh, great, I can get a credit card at Macy's, I can get a credit card at the gas station, I can get a credit card everywhere. No, when I say diversification, I mean the different types, right? So if you're going to have a revolving credit card, maybe have two or three, right? Maybe you'll have one for your bank. Maybe you'll have one for points, right? So like travel rewards and things like that. A lot of those are very lucrative, so you can look into those to leverage those. And maybe the third one is a Macy's or something like that, or a gas card, because, like I said, the rewards. But the diversification I'm talking about is when you get into installments, right? When you have a car note, when you have a home loan, these type of broadening types of your types of credit play very, very well with a lender because then they know, oh, you know what, this person can handle many different ways of debt and they're handling them very well. So showing that ability is almost like showing a broad skill set to an employer. It's what really draws them in and really helps them to lend to you. So just to go over it again, when it comes to credit, you've got the different types. That'll be the basics, revolving, installment, and open. You've got where to start, right? I said student credit card with no fees. You've got maintaining month. You got paying your bills, low utilization, and checking that credit report. And you've got improving time, consistency, and diversification. All right, number 3, investing. A lot of people get excited when I talk about investing because they're like, all right, I want to be a millionaire. Now I'm going to finally hit it rich. This is where the big bucks are going to come in at. I will say this before I even get started. If it sounds too good to be true, it most of the time is. A lot of times when it comes to investing, and I deal with it, this is what I deal with all day, every day, is helping people understand. It's about reaching reasonable financial goals. So for some people, it may be education. Some people, it may be growing wealth or growing their assets. Some people, it may be securing them or protecting them. So find out what your goals are when it comes to investing, and that'll give you a good starting place. So, all right, so getting into investing, I'll break it down into 4 different sections. How much, when, where, and in what. So when it comes to how much, when it comes to investing, like I said, you got to work on what your goals are, but most of the time, it's as much as you can. Investing is often an investment in your future because almost the definition of investing is putting money to work for it to grow for the future, right? So you want to put money to work for it to grow, to be withdrawn in the future. Like I said before, this will often be savings. People see investing and savings going hand in hand. You're putting money away for a later date. You're putting money away, and you're hoping it grows to be used in a later date. So how much? It's often as much as you can afford. But make sure that you're hitting your other goals and it works in line with your budget. When? When should you invest? I tell people when they are ready. Don't jump into investing because you feel like this is a great opportunity. I want to get in the game, or I want to start investing and make some money. It's not how it works. You want to invest when you're ready. The other time to invest is when it's necessary. When you get your first job, they're going to say, would you like to open up a 401k or a 403b or some type of retirement account? That is when it's necessary. That's when you automatically want to say yes. And I can promise you this, when you get your first job and they offer you a salary and you're going to be making, and almost vast majority of people across the board, they're going to make more money from that first job than they have made prior. And so what I always tell people, put it away from the jump. Whether it's 5%, 10%, whatever it is, put it into your 401k or whatever retirement account that's offered. Don't worry about the match. Let me be very clear. If your company says they'll offer you 4% match, that's fantastic. That's an extra 4% in savings. But make sure that you're saving as much as you can. And when you do it in the beginning, you don't really notice it because very few people who've never had a salary notice the difference in their income because it's so much. So you get your first job, you're getting a $65,000 or $70,000 salary. You say, I want to put 10% to my retirement. You're not going to notice that in your first check. You're just going to notice the money in your first check and be happy about it and use that to live off. But changing it down the line is going to be much, much harder. So like again, how much? As much as you can afford. When you're ready or when it's necessary. And another thing to go into when you're ready, and that's when you've done some research. So if you want to invest in like the stock market, things like that, there are places online where you can do this. So if you go to CNBC, they have a stock challenge that you can compete in. It's free. So at least you can get a feel for how stocks work and how buying and selling them works and how volatile and crazy they can be. Also on Yahoo Finance, you can go and set up a portfolio. Google Finance, you can set up a stock portfolio with a mock. It's basically a fake place where you can trade stocks and see how they perform. No money, nothing necessary. As long as you have the internet and a computer, you're good to go. So be prepared, be ready. Don't go in there and just blow money because it happens to people all the time. And then they come to someone like me and try to get help to figure it out. So better to be prepared beforehand than after. Okay, where? So for most of you guys who are going to be pretty young, I'm going to suggest, right, if it's not at work in that retirement account, look at an online broker, right? So you don't want to be paying large amounts of money or large fees for an individual to help you manage all $1,000 of your investable assets. You want to go online, and like I said, you want to get an online broker. For example, I suggest Scottrade to a lot of people because they actually have a place that you can go in. They have what they call bricks and mortars. They have stores on the corners in a city or a town near you. So that's where I started. I walked in. I said, hey, actually, I started it online, set it up. I transferred my account, set up my Bank of America account, connected it, sent them money. At the time I was investing, my refund check, I had about $800. I thought I was doing something big. But when I got confused and got uncomfortable, I walked into an office. They explained to me how the system worked. They walked me through things, and it was great because I actually had somebody to talk to. But the reason why I say online is most of the time you're going to be buying and trading things from afar, as well as if you want to buy a stock, why pay, $100 at some big brokerage firm when you can spend $7? Once it gets into large amounts of money, you want to be a little more considerate about how you're investing. So like I tell people, if you get a bump or a bruise, you can WebMD it. But once you start dealing with significant issues and real things, you get in a car accident, you're not WebMDing it. You're going to a professional. So once your assets start to grow, go see a professional. Then somebody can help you through things. And last but not least, in what, right? So that's where the rubber really meets the road, right? So now I set up an account, whether it's at my job or on an online broker. I can finally, put this money to work. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. What do I invest in? I mentioned some of them before. There's stocks, right? So that's basically equity into a company. You can go type in AAPL, right? That's the stock symbol for Apple, and you can invest in Apple. It's very simple. They've got a price. They're trading a little over $100. You give them $100. You pay the transaction cost. You are now invested in Apple. That's one way to do it. That's one investment vehicle. There are, and that's often called, that's equities, right? So equities is any stake in a company that you can invest in, right? There's fixed income, which is the other side of things. That's when you're loaning a company money. Most of you won't even be worried about this until you get a significant amount of assets, or you're investing in the third type of vehicle, which is a mutual fund. So the second type, I kind of skipped over it, which was bonds, right? You're loaning a company money by buying a bond. It's almost pretty much like I said, the installment credit, where they're lending you, you're lending them this money. They're giving you an interest rate, and they're telling you at this point, we're borrowing it for 5 years. We're going to give you 5% a year, and then after 5 years, we're going to give you the principal you gave us back. So, I'll go over it again. There's stocks, there's bonds, and there's mutual funds. Another thing, there's a lot of investment vehicles, but I'm going to go over the basics. Another type of investment vehicle that's very popular now, that wasn't even around 20 years ago, is exchange traded funds. So say, for example, you don't know what to invest in. You don't know what stock to, put your money into. You're like, I don't know. I just want to invest in the stock market. What's the stock market? So there's indexes that are out there that you can invest in broad spectrums. So the S&P 500, right? The top 500 companies within the United States. So very specific, but very broad and still. If you want to invest in, there's an ETF basically that mirrors the performance of the S&P 500, which mirrors the performance of the underlying companies. You can do that. That's what ETFs are, or exchange traded funds are. They give you the ability to invest in a broad spectrum of companies with one investment. Now, you can be even more specific. I want to invest in financial companies. So there's an S&P 500 financial ETF. You can do it in healthcare. You can do it in technology. You could even do it in equities or companies in Europe, right? I want to do just purely Japan. You can be very specific in ETFs, or you can be very broad. So they even have global companies, right? It's the MSCI World. It's an index of all the companies in the world. They give a sample size from each place, pull it together, put into an investment that you can invest in. So there's going to be a ton of opportunities. You can go to these websites and look at them. Some of the websites I suggest when it comes to ETFs, because it is one place where you can get diversification, is iShares. There's ProShares. There's Direxion. You can Google these names. Direxion has an X in it, so it's so just look out there. You'll see what you're offered. A lot of times when you get into these online brokers, they'll have these availabilities, and this is what these investment opportunities for you. This is why I like making that phone call, or having somebody that you can contact, and not just some type of online service or a machine. But to bring it full circle, I think when it comes to most of you guys making the first is just initial decision, it's going to be, you got your first job, you got this retirement account, and they offer you 10 to 15 mutual funds. You got to make a decision. What am I going to invest in? Ask. There's going to be a lot of people in your HR department that are going to be happy to give you some guidance, and it's going to be, hey, what are you looking to do? These are the places you can invest in. I typically will say there's simple suggestions. Nowadays, they're called target date funds. If you're 35, if you're 30 years old and you're looking to retire at 60, they'll give you a target date fund that's 30 years out. So if it's 2015, it'll be 2045. If you're 25 years old and you're looking to retire in 40 years, they're going to give you a target date that's 2055. So those are simple places to start until you can build up your knowledge and start getting some opinions on where you want to invest. So That's a broad spectrum of investing. Like I said, there's four things you want to think about. How much do you want to invest? When do you want to actually start investing? Where do you want to put this money, and where do you want to actually invest? And like I said, in what? So there's a lot of investment vehicles ranging from stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, bonds. There's equities, there's fixed income. It's a broad spectrum, focusing on what you feel is going to be more comfortable for you and that you feel knowledgeable about. And if you don't know, ask. There's no problem with asking and finding out more information, because it's your wealth that you're playing with now. And the fastest way to get to a billionaire or a millionaire, and that is investing in your own future. So I think I'm 30 minutes in. I'd be happy to open up to questions or expand on anything else that Grace, you think I should.
Okay, we have a few questions. So the first one is, can you name other apps and websites that you can use to create a budget?
So mint.com I mentioned before. There's some, I mean, if you go to Apple and you go to personal finance, they'll give you some. Yahoo has a budgeting app. Uh, Google has a budgeting app. I will say the simplest way to do it without overwhelming yourself is Excel. I mean, budgeting apps are very straightforward. They're very simple. They have inputs that you have to provide them. So knowing what your inputs are makes your life a lot simpler. So if you go to Excel, find out what your expenses are, find out what your income is, write it down. You'll at least have the framework. And when you can go to these apps, they'll come up and say, all right, you know, a mint.com or a Yahoo budget app, and it'll say, all right, what's your income? How much are you spending? And how much you want to save. Then they'll run for you, and then at the end of each month you either plug them in, or you'll have them attached to your accounts, and they'll monitor it for you and say, hey, look, looks like you're spending more than $2,000 this month. Maybe you need to get yourself online. So there's definitely some place you can search for in the app store. I suggest mint.com because I've used it in the past, but I really think Excel is probably the easiest place to start.
Okay, our second question is, should you ever close a credit card?
Good question. So closing a credit card. You can absolutely close a credit card. I would say be mindful about it, because you can not use a credit card and leave it open. But closing a credit card, I think, is a good idea for people who are focused on, one, security, right? If you're worried about somebody stealing your identity and getting to a credit card that you may not use often, that's a good idea to close it, right? If you're not going to pay attention to it or watch it, you should close it. But I will caution you to this, because remember I was talking about utilization. You lower your available credit by closing credit cards. So I can give you an example. I have a Macy's card. My wife doesn't know I have a Macy's card. I most of the time don't know I have a Macy's card. I have about $1,000 limit on it. Why do I have it? Because I like having an additional amount of utilization, a larger amount of utilization or available credit, so that when I spend money on my other card, it's not as much of my overall amount. Do I use the card? No. The reason why I got it is because they offered me a great offer. It was like 15%, and I used it to get the discount. Once I used it, I paid it off, I cut it up, but I still have it available to me. So having available credit can be extremely useful. So in times when you might max out a credit card, which is use the entire amount of available credit, you still have in your overall revolving credit other sources of credit, which may be another card, a store card, or something of that nature. So absolutely, if you feel uncomfortable about a credit card, you can feel free to close it. Closing credit cards do not hurt your credit score. So I can tell you that again, the act of closing a credit card does not hurt your credit score, but you've got to be mindful, because if you have one credit card that's $500, another credit card that's $500, and that's all you have, and one you've got fully maxed out, the other you have nothing on there. If you close the one you have nothing on, your utilization just went from 50% to 100%. So, and that will hurt your credit score. So be mindful, be thoughtful. Doesn't hurt to close them, but focus and make sure you're aware of your utilization.
Cool. Question 3. What would you recommend? What credit card would you recommend for a student?
So just take it back. Whenever you bank with, look for that free student credit card, right? When I say free, again, that's no expenses, meaning no annual expense. You're always going to have an interest rate, but my first credit card, like I banked with Bank of America. I went to Bank of America. I know people who started with Santander, right? If your bank doesn't have a good credit card or a free student credit card that you feel comfortable with, go to some of the more popular ones, right? So open up an Amex card. A charge card is a good place to start. But it's like I said, that's a different type of credit card, different type of credit, right? That's open credit. If it's a charge card because you pay it off monthly. But there's also Capital One. I'm going to be honest. I've learned a lot of people use credit Capital One. I have a rewards point through Capital One. It's a very notable credit agency. I'm pretty sure they have a free student credit card. So if your bank doesn't have a free student credit card, you can check out Capital One.
Okay. Can you ever invest too little, like too small of amount of money?
The answer to that would be no, right? So if you've got $100 and you want to start investing, feel free. And investing is what you use it for, right? So if you've got, like I said, if you've got goals, if you want to learn, right, your goal is education, maybe investing a small amount of money is probably the best thing you can do. So there's never too little money to get started. Like I said, I got started at $800. I know people who got started at $100 and started buying. Like I said, ETFs are very low cost and often have small face values, right? So you can get an S&P 500 ETF at $13, $14, right? So maybe you buy 3 of those. Maybe you buy 2 Japanese equity ETFs for $12, right? So you don't need a ton of money to invest. I don't think there's a minimum. I definitely think there's a maximum because you don't want to put yourself in financial straits and you don't want to gamble. I always tell people, don't gamble with money that you need. Investing is for the long term. And I also want to make so you didn't ask me this, but I want to make this point. There's 2 different types of investing too. There's trading and there's investing. When I use investing, I'm talking about for your future. Trading is often instant. So people day trade. They will buy and sell something in a day. They will buy and sell something in 2 days, 3 days. That's trading. When you're just trying to, get in and out of something, make a quick buck, that's trading. That's not investing. When I say investing, I'm talking long term. Long term is different for everybody. So long term could be 6 months to some people. Long term could be 50 years, or it could be a lifetime. So different types of trading. But to go back to the different types of investing. Go back to the initial question. There's no minimum.
What books or blogs do you recommend to read if you want to learn more about investing or budgets?
So, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Millionaire Next Door, that is probably the most fundamental book that everyone always says look at. When it comes to investing, I'm a big fan of Jim Cramer. I will be honest, I do not like reading. I know that sounds crazy, but that is not my strong suit. Probably most of you guys, that is right up your alley. But when I started investing, there's a TV show called Mad Money. It is run by Jim Cramer. A lot of people think that he is, just a TV personality. He's just a host. He really doesn't know what he's talking about. Look at the guy's biography. The guy is fantastic. He's very intelligent and he's very well read, very good with the markets, and he can explain it in a very simple manner. He's actually got a couple books. One book I can suggest, I can see now, is Stay Mad for Life. That's one book that I thought was incredibly informative. Another book is Real Money. Definitely 2 books that I highly recommend. Like I said, I'm not a reader, but I actually started reading through those. I got through most of those books. But you don't always have to use books. But if you are going to use books, those are 3 books that I think that'd be really good. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Jim Cramer has 2 books out. All 3 of them are best sellers, and I think you can learn a lot from them.
And our last question for the webinar is, where are you investing your money?
Good question. Surprisingly enough, I have gone through the entire spectrum of investing and trading, right? So I will, on a lower level, say I started with ETFs, and I started with leveraged ETFs. I thought I had a good sense of the market, and I used $800 from um, my refund check, but I had already won a stock competition at Howard University, so I had a good idea of how it worked. I ended up winning two, winning meaning placing. I didn't get first, but I got second and third, but I got money from them. So I had a good idea of it. So when I first started investing, I invested in leverage ETFs. What that is basically I had the idea that I wanted to invest in financial firms. This was in 2008, going into 2009. I said, hey, look, either this world's going to implode if the U.S. economy goes down, or it's going to come back. And when it comes back, people are going to make a lot of money. So I wanted to be one of those people. So I thought financial firms were going to do really well because they were the ones that were hurt the most. So what I did was I got a financial ETF that was leverage. Leverage means you get more on the upside, but you're betting more. So you also lose more on the downside. So I got a 3-time leveraged ETF for financials on the S&P 500. It did extremely well because if you know 2009 and 2010, the markets rallied, they came rallying back, and financial companies were up 40, 50, sometimes 100%. So I did really, really well. From there, I started trading options. It would take me all day to start talking about options, but options are in essence derivatives, and derivatives meaning they accrue their value off of some other underlying investment. So if I have a stock, I'm making money off the stock, but I'm not investing in the stock. That's what options are. They're a derivative because they make their money off of an underlying investment without investing in the underlying investment. Like I said, there's levels, right? It can get really intricate when you get to derivatives because you can get derivatives of derivatives of derivatives. So I tried trading options. My thought process was I knew that Apple was going to do well. So I felt like, I wanted to take it to the next level and say, hey, look, I can invest a small amount of money in a derivative that has, exponentially more possibility of upside or downside instead of just investing in the stock. I lost a lot of money. I'm going to be honest. So I stopped doing options. I mean, it's a very unique way of investing, but very, very risky. So bringing it full circle, I met my current wife, and she had a large amount of money that came from an annuity. It was $10,000, and I said, where do we want to invest this, right? Because now it was her money, now it's our money. I bought high quality mutual funds, and that's where I'm primarily invested now. My 401k is in high quality mutual funds. My personal money, when I get it, I put in the mutual funds. And because I buy mutual funds, because I know the best place to put my money is where a professional manager is managing the money. Yes, I'm going to pay some type of fees. Yes, I'm going to take some risk, but yes, I feel more comfortable it being in a place where somebody has professionally managed my assets instead of me making all the decisions. So yes, that's my number one place where I put my money. Another source of investing that I have my money is a house. I'm doing this webinar from my office in my house. I took money out of my 401k to buy a house, and I pay my mortgage every month. And that in essence is an investment, right? I chose not to rent and have the ability to just move and jump and leave at the end of the lease because I felt like investing in a home was a good investment. I bought my house for a certain price. My goal is that was about 2.5 years ago. When I leave in 3 to 5 years, it's going to be worth significantly more, and I will have paid down some of the debt. So I'm going to net a good amount of money. So if you want to know where I'm investing in high quality mutual funds. And I'm also investing in real estate, which in this case is my home.
Well, thank you so much, Earl. That is the end of the questions that we have for tonight. Do you have any closing remarks or anything you would like to say?
So just to kind of close it out, I would say you guys want to really think about budgeting because it's only going to get more difficult. Right now, having your living expenses and some of your expenses covered really helps because that's one or two things or many things that you don't have to worry about right now. those of you who are taking care of other people, you got people at home, and you got friends, family that you may be supporting, parents, children, you know that there's so much that goes into budgeting. And if you can get a good grasp of that, everything else will come easy. You know, you can pay your monthly bills because and maintain and have good credit because you've budgeted well. You can invest, right? You can take your savings and put those to work because you've budgeted well. Whether you've got $50 a month or $500 or $5,000 a month, and extra money that you can work with, you definitely want to find a way to master budgeting, because once you get older and the more complicated your situation becomes, it is going to be that much more difficult to manage a budget. A great man once said, more money, more problems. It's so true. So understand and master budgeting now, because the next level is just only going to get more difficult.
So thank you so much, Earl, for joining us tonight on Webinar Wednesday and for closing out our series on money management. Earl can be found on LinkedIn under the name Earl Crockett. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the XGMS hashtag or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. Thank you all for joining us. And Earl, thanks again.
Happy to help. Take care.
Bye-bye.